Welcome back to Out Loud, the Selective Mutism podcast. I'm Chelsea.
And I'm Ann, Chelsea's mother.
Last week we talked about teens with Dr. Elisa Schippenblum. It was a really informative episode, so if you haven't listened to it, you should go check it out.
Yep, she gave a lot of good information.
Yeah, and we've wanted to talk about teens for a while, so it was good to get some expert advice. So this week we're talking about some social distancing goals, I guess you would call it.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about all the Zooming and FaceTiming with family. So I just thought, well, first of all, before we jump right in, I wanted to welcome everyone back. And it feels like we're getting somewhat back to normal. At least in New Hampshire, the beach is open today for the first day. So that was great. Chelsea and I just took a nice long walk on the beach. And it was super. So we hope that you and your communities are also getting back to some of your normal activities. But while we are still social distancing, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Zooming and FaceTiming family members because, you know, even though the people or the relatives are not right there in front of you, it still can be tough for kids with selective mutism. I think it's intimidating to have a screen there with your grandmother or grandparent or whoever it is that you're Skyping or FaceTiming or Zooming on the screen staring at you. Kind of there's that expectation again of speech. So it's tough. And I know I've read and we've had some listeners telling us, you know, it's not really working out, at least doing the schoolwork online, like their kids are not able to be on the screen or are not participating in the school through Zoom.
And some kids they don't like seeing themselves on the screen as well, so that adds to it.
Yeah, so it's still tough for kids, even though, you know, it's not face-to-face. So I just thought we'd talk a little bit about that and just some tips maybe, you know, just how specific you need to be to try to make that successful. And I think sometimes it could even be more intimidating because it's not like a natural situation. You're not like in the school. You know, it's kind of like a special thing where you're setting up the laptop to do a special activity. So that can kind of throw that expectation in there, a little wrench or whatever.
So we kind of each picked a goal to work on and talk about.
So this was mine. I just wanted to kind of sort of break it down for people, and hopefully that would make it a little easier. So what I thought is having, it's really for the parents to do, obviously. The kids can't, you know, it's for the parents to do, for the parents to set up. But I thought if you had a scheduled routine to Skype or FaceTime or Zoom family members, so I thought for this example, I'm just going to use like a grandparent. So have a preset scheduled FaceTime or Zoom session. And the most important part is ahead of time, you want to tell the grandparent that they're not allowed to ask any questions of the child. So that's the deal. We're going to have a Zoom session, we're going to FaceTime, but you're not to ask any questions whatsoever. So
that can be hard.
Yeah. I think to a different generation, grandparents, whatever, they might, you know, like, what do I do? What do I talk about? How do I not ask a question? So basically, you know, selective mutism kids, we want to talk around them, make comments, maybe tell a story, but we don't want to initially just, you know, boom, ask them a question. But again, it depends where they're at. Chelsea always says, meet them where they're at. And
but yeah, taking the pressure off usually reduces anxiety.
Yeah. So I thought have a set time that you and your grandparent or whatever agree upon. And I kind of like the idea of doing breakfast, like a breakfast meeting, because eating is like a social event.
Like, yeah, if you're doing something so that you're not just focused on the video.
Yeah, and then I kind of thought too, like breakfast is good because it's the first thing in the morning. So you kind of get this goal or whatever out of the way, and then you can, depending on, you know, if it goes well, you could reward with TV time or some kind of activity that the kid likes during the day. So anyway, I just like the idea of breakfast because it's first thing in the morning. It's good for grandparents, whatever, because it is a social event. You kind of have breakfast with them during the social distancing time. That can be tough for seniors also. So we'll just say that it's breakfast. So have a preset time, breakfast in the morning, it's great if you can do it every morning because consistency always gets better results. But if you can't, like at least maybe 3 days a week would be good, just to have that routine so the child knows what to expect every morning. You're just going to have breakfast by Zoom. So all kids are different, obviously. One thing, it's not going to work for all kids. All SM kids are different. Just because they have SM, obviously they're not all the same. Everyone has different quirks, and they're at different stages in their selective mutism journey. So basically it depends on where your child is at and what they're comfortable with. If they're already verbal with a grandparent, then that's going to change all this. So I'm kind of focusing on a child who really isn't speaking to the grandparent, and this is a way to gradually start the process of having them become comfortable with the grandparent. So you have a preset time, as we said, breakfast. So you don't focus on the Zoom, you focus on we're having breakfast. Maybe the laptop or computer is just, happens to be set up, and you dial in, you have the grandmother on the screen or the grandpa. There's no expectations of an interaction. Basically, you're just going to have breakfast. And I would recommend not initially commenting on the child's outfit or whatever, right, but to the parent. Maybe the grandparent can comment on the parent or talk to the parent, or, just explain how their days went yesterday or what they did the day before or what they're having for breakfast. Mostly description, and maybe telling a funny story from the day before, and then just gradually working their way over to commenting on maybe something that the child's doing, or, you hope that they have a good day, hope their breakfast is good. Obviously no questions, like I said, and then gradually working your way towards commenting on something the child's doing, like an activity or whatever. You could maybe read a storybook to the child. That doesn't take any, there are no demands on interacting with that activity. Mm-hmm. And they may not even be ready to look at the computer, and that's okay too. You can, turn the computer screen away. That's all right. If you need to start there, just turn it away. And just them being present, having their breakfast there while it's up on the computer, being in the same room, maybe listening to the grandmother and the grandparent talk, that's a beginning point. So it's wherever the child's at. So the plan is to chat every morning just to increase the comfort level, decrease the anxiety, have them become familiar with the grandparent, try to find something in common between the grandparent and the child. Maybe have the grandparent talk about animals. A lot of kids like animals, or maybe their dog, or tell a funny story about when they were growing up. Try to find a common point of interest. So the parent really becomes the conduit between the child and the grandparent. Where the parent's the conduit, you could have the parent, have a conversation with the grandparent to also spark interest. Ask the grandmother or grandfather, maybe if they have a bird feeder out, did they see any interesting birds that day at their bird feeder? Did they do any craft projects? Have they done any puzzles? What kind of activities have they done during quarantine? Maybe what did they cook today? So at this point, they can just listen. They may not even be able to look at the person on the screen. So like I mentioned, you can turn the screen away, and then sort of each morning when you speak to them, you kind of turn the computer a little bit straighter each day to sort of get to that goal of having them look at the grandparent on the screen. And then once you've established that, and things are going well, you can kind of sense if your child is ready to move on, and you can just, kind of step it up a smidge. So it's really the parent that needs to commit to doing the exercise. You have to be consistent. You need to be responsible, that you're giving them the opportunity to engage. As a parent, it's kind of our job to provide the child with the opportunity to be successful.
Mm-hmm. But not putting pressure on them.
Right, you're just giving the opportunity, because I think everybody wants to be successful, and but they can't be if they don't have the opportunity. And then, also some kids, like you mentioned, they won't want to see themselves on the screen, and that's okay too. So that's just your starting point is different, that's all.
And that's not natural either. That's like a very unnatural thing. Mm-hmm. Like when you're talking to people in real life, you're not staring at yourself the whole time and watching like
yourself in the mirror talk.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think it's totally fine to just hide that little square. Like,
Yep.
there are ways you can hide that square, and I
Right.
think that's fine.
So you can just turn that feature off to start with, and that's perfectly okay. Right, so then once, you've kind of established that, you've done it, you're doing it every day, it becomes part of your daily routine, then you just want to step it up a little bit. Maybe they could, nod yes or no, start with nodding. Maybe they can hold something, and then you'll refer to it for the grandparent to show it to the grandparent. So you can kind of start with nonverbal, as long as the child's okay with that, as long as the child is now comfortable with that. So you could then refer to the child, show the picture you drew, to grandma, and they can just hold it up. So nonverbal actions. And if they do say something and, grandma, grandpa wasn't able to hear it, instruct them not to ask the child to speak louder, at least in the beginning. I mean, maybe that could come down the road, but I think from anyone we've spoken to, they say even if a child's whispering, just let them whisper. Just let the whisper go on. At least they're being verbal, and you don't want to discourage that. I know with you, when we would ask you, you would become frustrated, and then you wouldn't repeat it, and then it became like a negative thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, baby talk is okay, whispers are okay, but you're going to start with nonverbal. So just having them nod yes and no, having them hold up a paper like we talked about. Eventually maybe you can get to the point where they will say yes or no. And the goal, I think humor goes a long way. So just, if the child giggles or smiles or that's all positive, right? Those are steps to being verbal. Any sound making
shows that they're comfortable.
Right. Any expression at all really is interaction, is communication, and that's a success. And those are all steps to, gradual steps towards being verbal with their grandparent. Once the comfort is built and everyone seems at ease, mom and dad can secretly try to leave the room or leave the screen at least. I used to do things like this to Chelsea. I'd cough or say my throat is dry, I need to go get a drink, or maybe you need to go to the washroom, or you need to go get a tissue.
You could do that even more gradually. Like, you could just be, like, in the kitchen and have the kid at the table with the screen, and you're, like, washing dishes or something. Mm-hmm. And then eventually it's, like, moving further and further away.
Yep, and I think even just, like, to have you go off the screen is a step forward. So the parent, for the parent to be, just get up and go put something in the garbage can and come back. See how they tolerate
because it's
that.
easier to be in a group of people in
right.
a call. Yeah.
Right, and they might panic the minute the mom steps away, like, oh no, don't leave me alone here with grandma. Like, right. So just gradually trying to fade yourself out and let the child have a couple of minutes on the screen alone with the grandparent and see that they tolerate it okay before you lengthen that period of time.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it helps to tell, when you tell the parents not to be asking any questions, I think it's also helpful to tell them, be silly. Like, if you have a funny story to tell, like things that will kind of lighten the mood and lighten the situation. And so there's no, like, awkward silence. Silliness can kind of go a long way. And I was just, sort of thinking, as a parent, it can be tough to put your kids in those situations. But unless you're willing as a parent to step back when the moment's right, then that kind of gives your child a chance to step forward. But if you're not stepping back and you're always there and always, kind of in the way, your kid cannot make progress because you're kind of holding them back, even though you don't realize that's what you're doing. So just very gradual steps. It's a long process, a slow process, but if your child won't talk to your grandparents, I just think this is a great thing to try while we're all home and we kind of have the luxury of having breakfast together and not rushing out the door. And even with teens, you could do the same thing, but just, have the teen be in the room, or while the teen happens to be in the room, decide to Skype, grandma or grandpa, and just have it be a regular kind of gradual process of exposing them to the grandparents. So that was my kind of goal for the week. Anything that you can think of to add to that, or anything that you disagree with?
I think you had a lot of good ideas. Like, I think doing something rather than just sitting and staring at a screen, like if you're eating breakfast, or even doing anything, like if you're playing with toys or you're making cookies or something, like at least your focus isn't all on the social interaction. So I think that's a good tip for anything. And then this is like, it's like we're trying to get kids good at doing like FaceTime, but it's like hopefully this is just temporary.
Right.
But I honestly think this could be a bridge to verbal communication, like in-person communication. Like if I've never talked to my grandpa, but we've worked on talking through Skype, then I'm more likely to talk to him in person, I would think.
Right. Yeah.
So I think you can still be making progress right now. Even
Definitely.
if this is ending for some people.
Yeah, and I remember, back when Chelsea was maybe grade, 3 or whatever, when all the kids were using AIM or AIM.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of how Chelsea first started talking with her classmates, was going online. When she wouldn't speak to them all day at school, and then the minute she got home from school, she was logging on to AIM, and she would, interact with the kids. So I think, technology is a great way to sort of get your feet wet without being put in that situation for real.
It's kind of like in between. Being verbal.
Yeah. So I know that was like super painful because I went step by step by step, but I just really want to point out, like, right from the beginning, breaking it down into teeny tiny little steps.
Yeah. I think a lot of parents get overwhelmed because they're like, oh, we tried class and my kid wouldn't even do it. Like, we give up. Like, she can't do it. But it's like, what if you started with tolerating 1 minute?
Yeah, or just being in the room.
Like
when we had Jonathan. Yeah. Jonathan wouldn't walk into the classroom, but he'd stand under the light switch. Yeah. That's okay. I mean, you have to start somewhere.
Right.
So just start and just do it every single day.
Yeah, the key is just being consistent and not just saying, like, oh, we can't do this. It's too hard. So I kind of focused on something similar. I was thinking of school, but I know a lot of kids are ending school right now. But we did talk about some schools are doing summer school, and I know some schools are not opening in the fall. I think around here they'll be opening, but...
I know somebody at work that just said their daycare center's not opening in the fall.
Wow.
And she's really up. She has no idea what she's going to do for daycare.
I had a mom message me on Instagram about her daughter. Her school isn't opening in the fall either, and they're so worried about, like, the new class and the teacher. Like, she's going to have a new teacher and everything. So... yeah, I just wanted to think about that. I guess this could also be applied to friends or family members like you just did. So let's see. It's also about tolerating being on video. I was thinking of all the messages that I see on Facebook about kids not being able to participate in class. And I think if this is here to stay, we need to focus on getting comfortable being on Zoom or FaceTime or Google Hangouts. So these are just some ideas to make it more comfortable.
Yeah, that is what tough I get. I never really thought about it, but, a lot of SM kids don't want their picture taken.
Right.
Or, like, I was the only one that was allowed to take your picture.
Yeah.
So it would be tough to be on camera.
I think it's, like, the sensory input, too. It's, like, there's too much going on. Like, you're seeing every person, you're seeing yourself and how you're responding, and you're also supposed to be, like, thinking of things to say. It's, like, a lot. And if you're self-conscious and you have social phobia like I do, you don't realize all the, the stuff that you're doing. Like, I don't know.
Right, little mannerisms.
Yeah, mannerisms, that's what I'm trying to say.
Habits and things.
Right, and then you're focusing on yourself, and it's overwhelming. So I just had some adjustments that you can make to try to make it easier. So if it's a classroom, you could work with the teacher to have smaller group time. I know in Zoom you can split people up into, like, even just one-on-one, but I think that's harder. I think a group of 3 is better because it's not...
kind of hide a little bit.
Groups are better than one-on-one, in my opinion. So I think that would be helpful, and I would suggest that they're with familiar peers or preferred peers in that group. And this is also true for friends. I think maybe one-on-one would be harder, even if the child has been verbal with that friend in person. It doesn't mean they're going to be the same online. There's a different layer to it. I don't know why. It just is harder. It's not the same. And some kids are just having an easier time with this. It
yeah, it's
really
funny
depends.
how different that it can be. But
so if it's friends, I would also think that a group would be better than one-on-one, like get a small group together. You could also, I know people do this, where they record videos and send them to the teacher, which people do this in regular school.
yeah.
But even now, I think it would be helpful. Whether you share it with the teacher or the whole class or a friend, just, I don't know, a video. It doesn't even have to be verbal. It could be like you
Doing something, doing an
yeah.
activity. Yeah.
I think teaching things is cool. Like if you're demonstrating how to make something or like how to do like an arts and craft project and you're recording it and then you're sending it to like a family member or a friend.
Right. Making slime is a good one.
Yeah.
Actually, our nephew just sent us one of her making pasta, putting pasta through the pasta machine. There was no speaking in it, but yeah, we really enjoyed watching it, and she did that.
You could also have a goal to type in the chat. I think teachers should recognize that as participation because it is hard to do that even. So if they're not ready to be verbal in class, then typing in the chat is a way to still participate. If they're just hanging out with friends, like you can type in the chat, you don't have to talk. And taking off that, the pressure to talk, like having the option to type in the chat, I think would be really
That's why I think
helpful.
when you started with AIM, wasn't it just typing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
AIM is only messaging.
It was a little chat room. Yeah, so that was great for you to start.
So they have those features in pretty much everything, I think. I also talked about testing just because of school. I know that I just saw this post on Facebook. It made me really sad. It was a girl who had to take a test, and her teacher said, like, oh, you have to have the video and audio on, so we know people aren't cheating, which is pretty standard, but I think accommodations should definitely be made for that. She couldn't tolerate the video or audio being on. I think she lasted like 1 minute, then shut it off. She did the whole quiz, but her teacher gave her a 0. So that made me want to cry. So I definitely think talking about accommodations like that and planning ahead for things like that would be smart so that it doesn't just come up and blindside you. And then obviously you'd have like a fading procedure to try to work on tolerating having the camera on. That also gets the teachers on board more if they know there's a plan to...
Right, that's true. To improve.
I already said this before, but changing the gallery view, so when you're on a Zoom call, it's like a grid of every person on the call, and that's really intimidating and also unnatural. Like, that's not how we communicate in real life.
It's like the Brady Bunch view.
Yeah. So you can change that. I don't know if a lot of people know that because I'm in staff meetings and people are like, oh, I can't see this person. But if you click, it's different in every program, but you can change gallery view to just speaker view, so only the person talking will be on the screen. And then I think having one-on-one sessions with teachers or classmates would be helpful too, like if you have that like alone time with your teacher, even if it's just for like a couple minutes. I think that is helpful. So I came up with kind of like a little plan for how you can, it's basically a shaping procedure for tolerating having the video on. So I figured you could start with video off so nobody can see you, but you're in the room and you're listening. You don't even have to be looking at the screen, you're just in the room like you said. And then you're gonna move up to, once you can tolerate that for a certain amount of time, you would move up to being in front of the computer. You can still have the video off, but you're both looking at the computer and the person who you're FaceTiming with, or the class.
So when you say have the video off, you mean...
So that they can't see you.
Okay, so your camera's shut off.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's good to know that nobody can see you, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you would move up to having the video turned on for like 1 minute. Like you would make a goal like, okay, we're only gonna be on for 1 minute today, and then you can play video games after school or something. It could even be shorter than that. Like if you have to start at 30 seconds, then do it. But once you're meeting that goal consistently, you want to keep progressing and move up, like bump it up to 2 minutes, or even slower. You could do 1 minute, 30 seconds.
Right, so just gradually increase the exposure of them being on the video.
Right. And then you kind of just keep continuing to do this until you can tolerate as much as possible, like the whole class. But the point is, it takes very small steps. I don't think people realize, like,
How
people just
small
give up,
increments.
like, oh, she can't do the whole class, so there's no point. Like, why are we even bothering? It's like,
Yep.
if you, I know 1 minute is stupid. Like, what are you gonna do in 1 minute? Like, being on the screen.
But it's a sense of accomplishment.
Right.
I did it.
But you have to start.
Nothing bad happened.
Yeah, and you have to start from somewhere. And
Right.
that minute probably feels like an hour. But
and you could even have an egg timer set up.
right, so
or
that you
something.
know when it's going to be over.
Because it's a visual to help
Right.
them see how much time is left.
Yep. And I just move at your own pace. Like, you know the child, you should be communicating with them to know, like, what their comfort level is and what they think they can do to meet their goals. And you definitely need to have an open conversation with the teacher about what goals you're working on and what the expectations should be, and any accommodations you want to make.
Yeah, when you were in kindergarten, I used to email the teacher and tell her what goal we were working on for that week. So if it was waving to her when she opened the car door, like, she knew to wave to you and then wait to give you that opportunity every day. So I always shared the goal with her.
Yeah.
Because you want to carry the goal from home into the school.
Right. I'd say you want to do this with, like, as many people as possible. Like, if you're struggling with school, you should be FaceTiming people that your child is familiar with and comfortable with. Like, if their best friend wants to FaceTime, you should be doing that. Like, that is going to help with just the exposure of being on camera. It's definitely not something kids are used to, and it's becoming important because they're missing out on school. And other people, I guess they're doing telehealth as well. So if kids are in therapy, they're not getting therapy right now because they can't tolerate being on the screen.
Right, so this all ties into that. It's just breaking down the steps to what they can tolerate and so gradually tweaking it to different comfort levels.
And doing this regularly is going to build confidence and behavioral momentum so that they're more likely to continue participating and making progress.
I think that's the biggest factor, actually. I honestly do, because like you said, a lot of people try something a couple of times and then they say, oh, she can't do it or he can't do it, it doesn't work out for us. But then that just means you have to tweak it somehow.
Yeah. I think a big thing that would be helpful is games, which I'll put the link for Boston Child Study Center wrote this article. It's actually written by Dr. Caitlin Wilbur-Smith, who I got to volunteer with for a Get Heard event. She organizes like exposure day camps that are really awesome. So she had some great advice, and just she listed all her favorite games that you can do online. And I like
Meaning by Skype? Or
yeah.
Okay.
So these are like, she has ideas for nonverbal video sessions, and then it moves on to verbal. But this is like what you were saying about how being silly is like can go a long way. Another thing I was gonna say along those lines is kids like those like filters, and you can use them in, I don't know if you can use them in Zoom, but some
like the facial stuff?
like it puts
the lady
funny
that was a potato.
it puts like funny stuff on your face.
That's true. That would be great.
That just gets kids laughing and like breaks the ice. So I think if you can do that, try it out and see if it like lowers the anxiety.
That's a good one.
Yeah. But I think you can do games with, like, you're still trying to build rapport with therapists, and you might even feel like you're starting over because it's totally different now.
It's like a different venue.
Yeah. So you could play games with your teacher, like one-on-one, or your therapist, or just a group of friends online to kind of get more comfortable. So the nonverbal games, she says, are like charades, which I think I would find pretty hard to do.
That's a hard one.
Yeah, that is a hard one. Simon says you could start like really easy, like touch your nose. Simon says touch your, I don't know, you can kind of change that one to be easier. And she says like just arts and crafts, like we said, doing things together.
That's a good one, I think, because you can just you don't have to say anything you're doing, especially if you pick an arts and crafts project that they like love, like making slime or making cookies,
something they're like an expert at,
right?
Because that really lowers their anxiety. It's not like they're making stuff up.
Origami, that's a good one.
There's a girl, another BCBA I work with, who does this with her clients. Like, she has them teach her how to do things. Like, they'll teach her how to make food and how to it's just a good way to get people verbal.
That's a good one for the teachers if they could talk with the parents ahead of time and find out an interest of the child. It's like that they love. And go with that.
And she has like fitness challenges, like yoga. That's a good nonverbal thing. She doesn't have this on here, but I was thinking like just showing things, like like show me the picture you made today, like show me your cat, I want to see your dog, like what does your bedroom look like. And then verbal games she has are like hangman. That would be easy because you only have to say one letter.
True. Yeah.
Hangman, I know on Zoom you can use a whiteboard to draw it, but you could also just use a paper and hold it up. There's would you rather, which is easy because you only have to say one word. Like, would you rather have... Usually they're silly, like, would you rather have belly button for eyes or eyes for a belly button?
Even like you and me, well, in the car, I've mentioned this before, but we used to do opposites in the car because you just wanted, I don't know. You
How
found
do you do that?
Funny. Well, I would just say, oh my gosh, it's so dark out today. It's so pitch black out. And I'd say it on a bright, sunny day.
So then I'd have to correct you.
You'd like be grinning and you'd like, no, it's not.
Oh, there's show and tell. I mean, you could show your cat and like answer easy questions about the cat. You could play I Spy, come up with like surveys or quizzes, you know. Like BuzzFeed has quizzes like that. Like you could go on BuzzFeed and like ask your teacher like silly questions and give them their result. And then Mad Libs is a great one. There's a link where you can play Mad Libs online.
You used to do those.
I used to cry laughing like in school playing Mad Libs with my friend in 3rd grade. Mad Libs is a great one because you come up with silly words and the story comes out really funny.
It's just silliness,
You could play 2 truths and a lie. You could do trivia. You could kind of come up with your own trivia questions too and then ask your friends or your teacher. So, I don't know. I just think like you're trying to be comfortable with being on camera and it's like don't force it, but try to make it fun and like reinforcing. Like even kids with selective mutism are probably missing social interaction. Like everyone needs that in their life and it's like they're not getting it and you don't want them to regress either, so it's good to be working on things and doing as much as you can, even if it's just being silly on FaceTime.
I actually just think this is actually like an opportunity. I know some people say it's not, but you could just kind of flip it and think like you have all this, I don't know, just the structure of your day is different.
Yeah.
So you're not rushing around, getting here, getting there, going here. You know, you have time at home where you can actually like just plan activities and like these sorts of activities and plan around these.
And I just wanted to remind everyone that this is not permanent. This is like hopefully going away soon. So I wouldn't stress like too much over this. I think it's like a weird skill for kids to be on camera.
It is and it isn't.
I mean, it's still important and they should be participating as much as they can in school, even though it's not in person. But it's like, it's not the end of the world. Like, you can, if you feel like you're starting over and you're making so much progress at school, it's not like anyone's fault. It's just no one could have planned for this.
You can still achieve your goals. It's just different.
And I think a lot of people are really worried about transitioning back to school, so I think working on these now will be helpful.
Opportunities, consistency, use this time, set up opportunities, and just repeat.
Right.
So stay safe, wash your hands, and practice.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you go leave us a 5-star review. We haven't got one in a while, so we're sad.
And to all those moms out there, hang in there.
All those moms who are being teachers. Good job.
And dads.